This episode is sponsored by Oribi. Hey guys, I've got a quick question for you. How many of you are tired of using Google Analytics? I bet quite a few of you are raising your hands right now. Understanding where and why you lose site visitors before they convert is hard. With Google Analytics, you not only have to get your developers involved with coding events, but you also have to struggle through endless piles of data just to figure out what's causing your leads to drop out. Seriously, it's kind of a nightmare. Well, you'll be excited to hear that there's now a better way to analyze your website and get actionable insights. Meet Oribi. Oribi is a unique marketing analytics tool that captures all the events visitors perform on your website without using any code. Oribi enables you to analyze visitor behavior patterns, build smart funnels, and get tons of insights so you always know what your next step is. Finally, you'll be able to understand your visitors and know what to change in order to convert more. No more blind spots. To start your free trial, visit oribi.io/SaaSdistrict or use the coupon code SaaSdistrict and get a free 14-day trial today. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Akil Jabbar, and welcome back to another episode of SaaS District. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the top SMB SaaS player in Latam and how to gain visibility and control over your SaaS. Today, we have our guest, Matt Cole, joining us. Matt is the CEO of SUMA SaaS, a leading provider of financial management SaaS for small businesses in Latin America. Matt is passionate about empowering entrepreneurs, making education accessible for all, and conserving the environment for future generations. So a lot to talk about today, but welcome, Matt. Super excited to have you on the SaaS District show today.
Thanks a lot, Akil. It's so awesome to be here with you, talking about one of our favorite subjects. I know we have this in common.
Yeah, a lot in common. So I don't know if I'm considered a gringo. I might be, but I've been spending most of my time here in Guadalajara, Mexico. I know, and also working in SaaS. So what is you as a gringo doing, as you like to call yourself, and you're also scaling an SMB SaaS company in Latin America. So if you can just share your story there and where you are right now.
Yeah, well, there was no master plan, but life just unfolds. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I was lucky enough to be involved in starting SUMA. To really scale and drive success of small businesses in Latin America using a very simple yet powerful financial management platform. So today, we operate in 3 countries, Mexico, Chile, and Argentina. And it's been really awesome to be just on the forefront of all the innovation and evolution and rapid adoption of software as a service solutions for small businesses in Latin America. I feel like we're just getting started, and yet there's so much more to do.
Yeah, I see a lot of opportunity here. I mean, I love kind of the ecosystem and what's available, but also a lot of risk and challenges and difficulties. But from your take and your experience so far, I actually haven't done. I think we've done one deal or one SaaS company we worked with based out of Argentina. From your take, what's your take on the difference between working in the Latam market to say the rest of the continent?
Yeah, well, every country in Latin America is different. Sort of, a continent united by a common language, I guess, or two. But everything is really different, and particularly as you move into the SMB space, the regulations, the different legal norms, customs, ecosystems means that for really to be valuable to a small business. Our platforms have to be hyper local. And so it's very different than large scale enterprise SaaS where, you're really attending big companies, and they all have very common needs. I'm thinking things like Salesforce or NetSuite or HubSpot, which don't really need to be localized other than translated, right? So, or SAP. So, we find that, the recipe to success is how do you maintain global standards and economies of scale, and collaboration and playbooks, and yet be hyper local in every single market where we operate.
That seems like a challenge, right? How do you guys balance that, right? You have the global demand and then local at the same time. You have different variables, right. Laws, working cultures, all the above, right? I mean, I can't even keep up with 2 different countries. I mean, I understand how challenging it would be, right?
Yeah, and even in a large country like Mexico, you may have different, regulations and norms, state to state or province to province in Argentina or state to state in Brazil. So, every country or even Colombia. So what we found is a couple things. you really can't be both, right? You cannot be global and be local. What you really have to do is you have to be the best of both, right? And that means a third way, sort of a middle ground. And we call it global DNA. And that means that everything we do thinking about how it will impact our clients in one country, but then also how can we expand that, adjusting it and localizing it to other countries. And more than a matrix, right, of global and local, it's really like literally a hybrid, a fusion, right? Rather than trying to be both, you try to be one together, and one being that global DNA that we're trying to build.
So if you see something that's working, let's say, in Guadalajara, Mexico, and then you're comparing it to, say, this is working here, let's take it and let's try it in Santiago, Chile, or is that how you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, what we're building is essentially a secret sauce, right? And so the ingredients of the secret sauce is, okay, what are global best practices, global standards, global software platforms? We work with, we run most of our company on, on HubSpot, for example, on for digital marketing and CRM, and then how do we then see what works, and then how do we adapt that to another market? And that is not just copy paste, right? That comes from, really thinking about not only the differences in the market, but the differences of where companies are in each market are slightly different in their evolution. And then the key to it is local empowerment, right? So this is not somebody in Santiago, Chile making a decision about, how we're going to go to market in Guadalajara, Mexico. This is actually the team in Mexico taking what has worked in other markets, adapting it, and then running that in their own market. So it's a combination of the global standards and best practices with local empowerment and autonomy.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And if you've kind of seen the differences between the different countries and what's working, what isn't working, what are the opportunities in different areas? Maybe can you share some maybe specific opportunities or maybe technologies that entrepreneurs in Latin America have that opportunity to expand into and get into that market?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a really interesting timing right now because I think there's we've seen just explosive growth of technology adoption and SaaS adoption in Latin America over the past year and a half. I mean, part of that has been driven by the pandemic, obviously, but there's some other things which are going on. Number one is, there's a whole new generation of entrepreneurs who are starting businesses. We calculate that just in Latin America, ex-Brazil, there are about 2 million small businesses which are started every year. And they're started with a blank sheet, right? So they're not trying to rip out and replace some, legacy on-premise software. They're starting with the best of breed tech stack, right? And that renovation or renewal of new companies coming into market gives them an opportunity to adopt best of breed solutions right away, right? They can set up their storefront on Shopify like day one, right? In fact, they don't even have a virtual store. I mean, they don't even have a bricks and mortar store. They go right to the virtual store. Number two is, bandwidth and internet connectivity is, it's completely abundant, right? And it was always a bit of an Achilles heel, a bottleneck for Latin America, the cost, the availability. I mean, now there's fiber to home coming into, many neighborhoods around the capital cities of Latin America. There's great bandwidth, connectivity in the business districts, and there's very readily available mobile bandwidth and, basically 100% smartphone penetration right now in the region. And so that bandwidth bottleneck has been opened up. And then finally, the governments are also supporting digitalization efforts by making it easier to open up a business online, by requiring that businesses, invoice electronically, by making it easier to file taxes. But there's a lot of work still to do. But we're also seeing a lot more of that happening. And so in the end, right now, you can start a business in Latin America literally online, have a storefront set up the same day, and starting to sell and receive payments, something that would have taken 180 days, maybe even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know where you can see that quickness. I haven't seen that much, and things move a lot slower here. I know in Mexico, I think it takes at least 30 days or so to open, but maybe you can give a recommendation. So if I'm looking to start in Latin America, I want to open up a business here. Where would you suggest? Where's the easy place to get started?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what you want to do. I mean, some companies decide they want to be regional from day one, and they're, completely virtual. They don't even have a headquarters. They have talent all over the region. They're able to accept payments with credit cards, international credit cards. And, other businesses are highly local. I think it also depends a little bit on where you see the opportunity set, right? We've found that there are transversal pain points throughout the region, but the solutions have to be very local, right? So I think everything related to e-commerce is obviously super interesting. I think there's a huge opportunity among the underbanked and unbanked. The funding gap for small business in Latin America is over $1 trillion. Anything which is bringing sort of solutions, services, products to the final frontier, which are small businesses in Latin America, or underbanked, consumers in Latin America. I think, there's a blue ocean, which is just ripe for improvement.
Okay. I want to compare these two scenarios because I think we have a lot of people listening in. They're SaaS founders. Either they're looking to start their first SaaS and they're either considering, okay, maybe I set up a company in Latin America, or I have an existing SaaS and maybe I want to get into the market there. So maybe we'll talk about one scenario where, okay, I can go and set up, or I already have a registered company in Delaware, which I don't know if you have, set up my new bank account or, my Mercury account. And I have everything set up, and then I can go, my Stripe account and start selling as a U.S. company into the Latin American market. I mean, the issue there would be, obviously, if you're trying to hire local employees, maybe the currency exchange, and then maybe local taxes around that. Versus, if I want to say set up in Chile, because that's where I want to target and go to market there, I have to, I'm going to register a company in Chile and start, building out the company there. What would be kind of your pros and cons of both? And I'm sure you've looked at both of those, right?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to focus. I think, what I've seen is companies, which have a very niche solution, maybe for the US market or, another market globally, and see an opportunity to expand that very, very niche solution globally, right? And they've been very, very successful at that, right? And you can see many examples of that. And then that niche grows over time, and it might be a certain solution for, I don't know, management of vegetarian restaurants, right? And it's just like, it's a super niche thing, but it's can go, very broad. And then Latin America, I think, becomes one of the theaters where you play, as you play in the North American theater and the European theater and, the Asian theater, African theater, subcontinent theater, and, you become a global company. And I think, examples of that are like Slack and other things like that, right? Where, I think the other approach is like, we're going to have a very deep, sort of country focused strategy. And then we're just going to choose the countries, and we're going to just first go to Brazil. And once we get Brazil figured out, then we're going to, the big, Mexico, then we're going to get Mexico figured out. And, and you see, situations there, like, I don't know. I mean, a textbook example would be something like Uber, right? Which is super local, like San Francisco first, and then the rest of the United States, and then Canada. And then it was like, okay, Europe. And, and they just were hopping, and I mean, I think Nubank is an example of a Latin American company that has done that. Cabify is an example. You can see, Kavak doing that. You can see, other companies that are highly local because there's actually a physical thing you have to touch. It's like and it's very locally regulated and all of those. So, what I wouldn't recommend is trying to do both, right? Trying to be super niche and super local at the same time, because that's where I think you get into trouble, because it's just too hard to thread that needle.
And how did you start that up? So did you start in Chile itself and then, start in the Chile area and say, let's get to this level, let's get to a certain size? And you're like, okay, actually we're getting demand from Mexico. Maybe we should move there, or Argentina, or was it like, hey, let's just hit all of Latam from day one?
No, it was definitely not that. No, it was definitely, no, we really saw from day one that, there was an opportunity here to establish a leading player or regional player. And how we do that? We do that by being local. And so, together with Riverwood Capital, we invested in Nubox in 2016. Nubox was already an existing company when we invested in it and acquired control of Nubox, and then expanded to Argentina by incorporating Colpi in Argentina in 2018. And then at the end of 2020, we incorporated Bind in Mexico. So today we operate in 3 different markets with 3 different brands, each of them locally empowered with their own very strong and autonomous and entrepreneurial CEO, but then taking advantage of our global economies of scale in order to scale and accelerate growth on a more rapid basis.
Well, why did you decide to have 3 different brands? I'm curious, instead of keeping it all under one.
Yeah, it's funny. I think what we've learned is that in our business, at least, being local is really important. These were already three existing companies, so if you think about some of the more successful technology companies globally, they actually do grow by building out important business units that are local, that are branded. So if you think about Atlassian, or you think about even Uber with Corner Shop and with Kareem, you think about Facebook, you think about Oracle, you think about Salesforce, you think about Intuit, you even think about Microsoft with LinkedIn. And so, we really took a page from what the most successful companies were doing. And rather than just monolithic, everything's going to be called SUMA SaaS, we took a very different approach of local empowerment and maintaining our local flavor in every market.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. I mean, I see it makes sense because, I mean, if a company is entering into from Argentina into Mexico, and they're like, oh, what's this Argentinian company doing here called SUMA, versus like, hey, we've got this new Mexican company. I think there's a little bit of a different perspective, right?
Yeah, I try to think about it in the positive way, but there's definitely some regional rivalries which also make it, having separate brands make it also beneficial. Right?
Yeah, for sure. So you talk about how you really give back, and I appreciate that. I think that's very important when SaaS founders start doing well, to give back to the ecosystem to help develop it, because that's how the kind of whole cycle works. What are you doing right now to give back to the whole ecosystem in Latin America?
Yeah, I give back, and I also view it as paying it forward. I think one of the most important things that happened to me in my career, and one of the most fortunate things, was I had a series of amazing mentors. From my first career, at my first job at JP Morgan, and then working at TPG, and then, at working for, other, startups and other things, just amazing mentors. And so I really think that bond that you can form with a mentor who helps you sort of see the best in you and helps you bring out and get over fears and bring out talents and, sort of, grow and learn. And, so, a lot of what I try to do is investing my time. And so, I've been involved with Endeavor, on and off for the last 20 years since they got started, actually in 1999 as a mentor. I was on the board of advisors of Endeavor Chile for a while, and I just love talking to entrepreneurs, and I love, hearing their stories and their passion and trying to, I guess, impart some of my lessons learned so they can skip over all the mistakes that I made, and go right to making their own mistakes, new ones, right? And then, I've been involved with Mentores por Chile, which is another mentoring, organization, and also Startup Chile. And it's just, and I still take cold calls from entrepreneurs all the time. I've been doing a bit of mentoring, with Accelerator based in Ecuador recently. I love, talking to entrepreneurs, and for me, it's where I get my biggest charge.
Love it. I mean, and speaking about lessons, I mean, you've received a lot of good lessons, and through experience, and then obviously through mentorship, and seeing a lot of different businesses. Maybe can you share some of the maybe important lessons you learned as CEO of SUMA, and maybe would like to share for maybe earlier stage founders who are listening in? Yeah.
God, man, there's so many. I don't know. I could go on forever, but no, I think specifically about early stage founders. I do think. The cliches almost always ring true. Some of them which come to mind are, really become obsessed with the problem, not with the solution. I think that's I just see, the difference between a founder who's just like, there's a massive pain point, we're going to try to solve it, and this is all the things, and these are all, versus like, this is my awesome product, let me tell you all the great things that my product does. Like, I think just, really become obsessed with the problem. Number two is, I think assembling your team, even from your day one team, is really, really important. I still see the difference between a lone wolf founder who's got it all figured out, who's got this sort of like B team, who just is there to basically execute what he or she's vision. That's very different from a really cohesive team of co-founders with amazing hires. And lone wolves can go a lot faster. It's just they usually can't go as far as really cohesive. And then finally, I just love bootstrap businesses. Like, I think particularly today, there's so much focus on raising capital. and it's almost a full-time job. And if founders put as much time and effort in talking to customers as they did talking to investors, I bet you they'd be able to sell, and actually they'd be able to postpone any fundraising that they need until they've gotten much farther along, and they'd be able to raise at a much higher valuation and be able to suffer much less dilution. And you look at, there's been some very successful examples of bootstrap companies raising very large rounds of capital because they postponed that and they went and they drove revenues first rather than focusing on capital raising.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it takes almost like half of your time, right? I mean, if you're a CEO, and especially in the early stages when you have to build that reputation and those relationships, that's a lot of time you can be focusing in your business. A quick note from our sponsors today, and we'll be right back. This episode is sponsored by Contentify.co, a premium podcast editing and repurposing agency for busy content creators just like you. Are you spending too much time editing your podcast and end up with no time to stay on top of also publishing, sharing, reaching new listeners, while also staying ahead of the latest podcasting trends? Don't worry, Contentify has you covered. You no longer need to worry about spending hours editing and repurposing anymore. Just record your content and they handle the rest. Contentify is an end-to-end podcast editing and repurposing agency to help you grow your podcast by editing and repurposing quickly, easily, and reliably to share all over your social networks. And if you haven't even noticed, I also use them for the SaaS District podcast. So join other busy content creators just like you and me and start saving time and money while you grow your podcast show. Visit Contentify.co to learn more today. Kind of shifting gears to, your personal background or, in terms of where SUMA started, maybe if you can share just a little bit of stats of where you guys in terms of size today, and have you guys raised any outside capital, VC capital, or are you guys fully bootstrapped?
Right. No. Well, on the last, we actually are backed by Riverwood Capital. Riverwood Capital is a tech-focused private equity fund based in Menlo Park, California, with offices in New York City, and Miami, Florida, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. One of the most successful private equity investors in Latin America over the last 15 years. First institutional investors in Globant, which is a New York Stock Exchange, company based in Argentina. Early investors and main backers of BTEX, which did an IPO about 6 months ago here in the United States, and great investors in other very successful technology companies globally. But we've been basically cash flow positive since we've acquired Nubox. The company is growing at about over 40% year over year, cash flow positive. We will end the year with around $20 million of annual recurring revenue. And we have more than 100,000 small businesses on our platform in the 3 countries, and about 300 employees. We'll probably end up with the year around 350 employees in the 3 countries.
That's impressive. And what was the decision there, and why you decided to work with Riverwood Capital versus just kind of doing it on your own?
Yeah, no, it was funny. I mean, we had Riverwood and I had built another company together in the data center space, a company called Synopsys. That was an amazing learning experience for me, and working with the team there was really, really amazing under the leadership of Leonardo Kowalski. And then we began to look at this problem together. Riverwood had been mapping the SMB SaaS market in Latin America. I had actually started a small company here in Chile and was facing all the headaches of payroll and electronic invoicing and tax returns and tax filings every month, and, opening a bank account and getting everything. So, I had a very sort of, let's say, small and microscopic view of what was happening. They had a much broader global vision. They saw a huge, blue ocean. I saw like a really difficult pain point. And that's when we joined forces and started SUMA together back in 2016.
Okay. So this was very early stage when you decided to do that. Makes sense. Yeah. Well, speaking of kind of when you first started to where you are now, what is your vision today? Maybe, the long-term goal with your business, and maybe how has that changed from you first started off? Because I feel, I think sometimes you can keep the same, but I think a lot has happened. A lot of things, change over time. But what would you say has changed over the time?
Yeah, it's funny. I have to be honest here, Akil. When I first started, I just wanted to make a lot of money. That was what I really wanted to do. And that has really changed. Now I take this as a personal mission. Like it's almost like an existential cause of trying to power and transform millions of small businesses in Latin America to be more successful. And I'm a gringo who's dedicated the last 25 years of my career to Latin America. The region is, just transformed tremendously. But I look forward over the next 25 years and I'm like, if we can just change the inflection point of growth and success of small businesses, by 1% a month over the next 25 years, like that compounding will really be the difference and will really make a, important impact on the region. So, small businesses generate more than 50% of the employment in Latin America and more than, and 80% of them fail within the first 5 years of being formed or end up being plateaued. So if we can create that engine of growth and that flywheel of success to help it, that to me will be the most important legacy that I can leave with this project.
Love it. And if you were maybe, you see some opportunities all around you and you're looking to maybe rebuild a business or build a business from scratch today into Latin America, and maybe there's somebody listening in who maybe is looking for the next idea and is excited to get in this market, what problem would you tackle? What do you see as a good opportunity there?
God, that's a good question. I'm probably like the worst person to ask because I'm so obsessed with our problem. I don't see any other problems other than our problem. But I would just say one advice that I got once was like, if you see a line, if you're an entrepreneur and you see a line, get in the line, right? And the reason you get in the line is because you have people who are lining up, wasting their time standing in line. So if you have a hard problem getting something done in Latin America and you have to stand in line to open a bank account, you have to stand in line to get vaccinated, you have to stand in line to pay your car, just go get in that line and start talking to people who are in that line because none of them are happy to be in that line, right? Nobody's happy to stand in line. So I would use that if I were giving advice. Just go find a line to stand in and then figure out what you can do to cut that line down to zero, basically.
That's very good advice. I mean, the two things that come to mind are, banks and government here. So I think any of those two that you can touch, I think lots of inefficiency there's that can be capitalized on. Yeah. What are some of the greatest challenges, that keeps you up at night maybe these days as being a CEO and leader at SUMA?
Yeah, well, two things, right? I think about my own limitations. And so that keeps me up a lot, my own sort of fears and, failure and lack of skills. And I've never, done anything like this before. I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to think of the right questions. I've been working with a couple of great, executive coaches. I'm such a bad CEO. I have 2 executive coaches. That's how bad I am. So, and so that's one thing. And I think that's something we all struggle with. And so I'm convinced the organization moves at the speed of the CEO. And the CEO has to be growing faster than the organization. So I'm focused on how do I move faster and how do I grow faster? And that keeps me up at night. Sometimes I'm just listening to podcasts. In fact, I listened to a couple of your podcasts that were awesome. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And then the other thing that keeps me up at night is, sort of, should we be doing fewer things, right? Sometimes I feel like we have so many things on our plate as a company. We have 3 business units, 300 people working on, and sometimes I feel like as a CEO, my job is to be actually pruning and taking things away rather than adding them to the plate. And it's one of my weaknesses. It's like every time we have a Monday meeting, it's like, I've got to think about another idea to add. And it's like, what can we be taking away? What can we be taking off people's plates? What can we be taking off of this thing so that we can just focus on one thing and do that one thing incredibly, incredibly well? So I'm always thinking about, what can we be taking away, rather than what can we, and how do we get the organization just focused on one single thing to drive our success?
Yeah. Gary Keller and the one thing that book stays true even to today, right? And you have to always reinforce. It's so simple but so effective.
Yep.
I want to ask a question around that. You mentioned you have 2 executive coaches, so this has been something that's been, I've been contemplating over the last few months or actually years, and still haven't pulled the trigger yet. But keep hearing how effective it is and how helpful it is. Yeah. Usually because I'm pretty self-disciplined, but I know there's also little cracks that people can point out. And when did you make the decision maybe to get the first one? And maybe if you could share any advice of, whether myself or other people considering it, what did you look for and say, okay, this is the right person for me, and it just clicked and I'm ready to move forward?
Yeah, well, I have to say I was a super skeptic of CEO coaches. And in fact, I had actually had the opportunity to use a couple, and I turned it down basically, partly out of ego, partly out of pride, partly out of cost probably.
Sure.
Because I was like, if you need a coach, then it must be you're not doing your job well, right? It's like the typical thing, right?
Right.
And then it was actually an intervention from my team who came to me last October, actually, and they were like, "You need a coach, and let me tell you why." So it wasn't even my idea, right? And it was amazing. That was really helpful just on like basic leadership skills, how to transition from being, a highly sort of, hands-on micromanager, not trusting, tech, very much down in the weeds, to transform into being, more of a chief vision officer rather than, a chief operating officer, and moving on that continuum. And so I worked at the team from Leap Consulting, based here in Santiago, Chile. That just was an amazing experience for me. And, recently had my last session with Janine only a couple of weeks ago, and it was just like a really amazing experience. And so that was much more around leadership. And then I started working with the new coach, much more around sort of the basic building blocks of growth of SaaS companies, and how do we continue to grow at the same pace, because every month the bar just gets higher and higher and higher. And that's how I need to grow as a CEO. And that's been great. We've just done 2 sessions together over the past month. That's just been awesome to learn just like core competencies of scale up, being a scale up CEO and moving from startup CEO to scale up CEO. But if you don't think you need a coach, that's a good sign you probably do.
So me, I'm thinking I need one. I don't know what that means, but but if anybody is listening in and has a recommendation or somebody in mind who they can recommend, I'd happy to please send it my way. I'll be happy to chat with them and see if it's a good fit. But Matt, what's one piece of advice you wish you had known and would tell your maybe say 25-year-old self today based on what you know today?
Man, yeah, it's funny. I think it's funny because this is I don't think there's. And I think this is a really strange question. And the reason I say is I think that it doesn't matter what you say to a 25-year-old, they're still going to make all the mistakes. Like you have to fail and then reflect in order to grow. And the question, I guess the question is, how fast can you fail and how quickly can you grow? Right. So, and I guess what took me forever to get over was fear of failing. I would almost like rather not try, or like put the bar so low so that I was sure, because I was just so fear of failing in front of my peers, in front of my, in front of my bosses, in front of, investors, in front of like, and that like getting over that was so important. So maybe that would be something like, don't be afraid to fail. Although, and I think this is changing. I think people are realizing how, it's very different when I was coming up at JP Morgan, which was like, do not fail. Like if you fail, if you make a mistake, you're out, right? That was literally the culture of JP Morgan. It's better to make no decision than it is to make the wrong decision, literally. And like, that's the opposite of what we're trying to do here at SUMA. It's like, we're going to make mistakes. Let's make a decision. We don't have perfect information. We've got to do it. The quicker we make the decision, the quicker we execute, the quicker we can make a mistake, the quicker we can learn. And we got to always be learning, right? Always be learning. And so that's probably what I would have told myself if I could go back in 25 years.
Love it. Fail fast as quickly as possible. Yeah. Matt, who or what are some of the best 3 resources? They can be books, can be people, that are mentors or people you follow who you'd say have been the most instrumental to your success over the last few years. I guess before getting your coaches.
One of our board members turned me on to another podcast, Masters of Scale, with Reid Hoffman, which I think I've listened to every single episode. It maybe is so cliche now and everyone's listened to it, but at the time when I started listening to it, it's been about 3 or 4 years. It just was so inspirational. In fact, it was my dream to be on a podcast. So thank you for inviting me on this podcast. I'm really excited. I feel like, sort of like I'm Reid Hoffman, worthy now or something like that. And then I just read another book by Brené Brown called Dare to Lead. And it's a book which is the difference between armored leadership, where you're really buttoned up, you have all the answers, you're protected, you're really coming down on the team. You're very much of like a strong, person, strong CEO, and daring leadership where you're very vulnerable. You're opening up. You still hold your team accountable, but you do it in a way from a very empathetic way. And it was actually recommended to me by one of my coaches, and it was just an amazing read. I read it recently actually flying back down here to Chile recently. And then what I also really like to do is I love to just listen to any podcasts with other CEOs who are so there's a great podcast, How I Built This, which is really amazing. There's another podcast called Acquired, which is really amazing. So when I can't sleep at night, what I usually do, it's a little lesson there. If you turn on a podcast, if you wake up, it's sort of 3 a.m. with the heebie-jeebies and, the anxiety and the panic attack about the investor presentation, just turn on a podcast and literally it will transport you to a new realm. And you realize all the problems that you have as a leader are the same problems that all of the leaders have, and you're not alone.
Love it. Yeah, podcasts have been great. I mean, I have started listening to podcasts, I think over 5 or 6 years ago, and they've been game changer. I mean, I think it's a platform where people just open up and they share everything. I mean, where else can you get that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You can't get it at Clubhouse, I'll tell you that much.
No, Clubhouse is just a lot of pitches there happening, right? Yeah, stick to podcast for now.
Stick to podcast, exactly.
Matt, what does success mean to you today? Whether that's personally, business, financial, life. I mean, there's no right answer.
Yeah. It's funny how it all comes together, right? You end up spending time working on a project, which is really inspiring. You grow as a professional. You translate that growth into personal growth as well. And, what I really, really, if I could look through it, thinking about my own obituary, right? And there's some great advice I got from one of my mentors to, think about what you want your obituary to say, in the newspaper, and sit down and write your own obituary. And for me, it comes down to fulfillment. And how do I judge fulfillment? I will judge it by the success of the people that I've worked with and I've spent time with, the success of my family, of my peers, of our investors, of our customers, and each of them will define success in their own way. So I won't be defining it. But if I can help them become a little more successful, a little faster in what they define as success, that to me will be success for me.
Love it. That's a fantastic answer. This has been great. I really appreciate you jumping on the SaaS District show today. Continue success. Hopefully you can jump on to Masters of Scale next with Reid Hoffman. I think that'll be your next place. And do let me know when you're on that. But people listening in who want to get in touch with you, learn more about you, or maybe also check out your startup, where can they reach you? Where's the best place?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. So Matt Cole, CEO of SUMA SaaS on LinkedIn. I actually keep an email from our business here in Chile, which is Nubox. So that's matt.cole, COLE @nubox.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate you jumping on today.
Thank you, Akil. This was great conversation. Congratulations with the whole success of the podcast, of Horizon Capital, everything you're doing. It's awesome to have people like you down here in Latin America helping us build a better place.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the kind words.
You bet. All right. Take care. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank you all for listening in to this episode and joining SaaS District today. Don't forget to leave a review and subscribe for future episodes where we interview top leaders in the SaaS industry. If you're a SaaS company looking to grow and unlock the true value of your business, get in touch with us at horizoncapital.com. And myself or one of our consultants will provide a free assessment to help you get there and hit your goals. If you have any feedback or suggestions for this podcast, please DM us on Instagram or LinkedIn @Horizon Capital and help us improve our content for you all. Thanks again and hope to see you on the next one.